This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
I walked into the ghost-like hospital, didn't know what I was walking into, but saw my daughter for the first time in fear. In 7 months, this was the first time I saw fear in her eyes, which meant I then became very afraid.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that reminds you of the good in the world. Each episode tells the story of someone who has found real hope in challenging times and has made the world a better place. Episode 45, Raewyn Elsegood, Part 2. First things first, if you haven't yet listened to the last episode, go back and do that before continuing. It's called Raewyn Elsegood Part 1. This, coming up, is the second and final part of Raewyn's story. Let's get back into it. Last week on Finding Hope, we met Raewyn Elsegood, who shared the story of her daughter Amy. At 18 years old, just after finishing school, Amy was diagnosed with aplastic anaemia, which left her needing a bone marrow transplant, completely depleted of blood cells, and in hospital for 4 months. Amy finally came home on the day of her 19th birthday. But a few weeks later, a virus called CMV was found in her body after a routine checkup. Amy once again returned to hospital for the last time. She wouldn't come out again.
For 10 days, I wasn't allowed in because of COVID, and she managed it well on her own until she didn't. I had a call from the nurse unit manager of the cancer care centre where she got her day treatment saying, "I've just been up to check on her. We all love your daughter so much. She's so positive. She's the best patient ever. We all care. But it's time that we got you an exemption and you come in now. There's things she's not telling you." And so she couldn't say too much. But I was able to get in the next day and notice things that Amy hadn't been telling me, and that was she now couldn't walk to the bathroom herself, and she was being fed on a bag because her bowel had collapsed, and she was now on 2% oxygenation because the virus had entered her lungs. So what she was trying to do was protect us. I know that now, and it was the gift that I will always be grateful for, because I think we didn't realise how serious things had gotten, and she was trying to see if things could turn around before she told us what was going on. And I think if she said it out loud, it would be real herself as well, and change that positive mindset that the story she kept telling herself was, "I'll just get through today and tomorrow will be better." She would keep saying to us things like, "Mum, worry's a waste of time. What was the point of telling you?" And she would say, "I want you to live life to the full. And I'm trying to live life to the full under this circumstance. So what does my life look like living to the full in a hospital bed?" And it was quite a phenomenal thing to start watching her from that moment. Things went downhill pretty quickly. The second day I was there, I got a call. I'd only just got home from visiting her, and they'd said that she was down in ICU. Again, her protecting us. She didn't tell us that she had coded numerous times that night. I don't know that she even knew herself until I read papers later on that told me. And you just went, wow, again, you're just protecting us. She was sitting up in ICU in amongst all these ventilated patients with a great big high flow nasal oxygenation up her nose, smiling at me. So again, you see a smile and your heart just bursts with pride, and you go, well, she's okay. If she was okay, I was okay. And right from the very beginning, I think I just followed her lead, because I was dealing with an adult daughter here who had taken charge of her own care. And if this is the way she wanted to play it out, I needed to follow along as long as I didn't think it was detrimental to her health. That's when I think I would have stepped in and changed the storyline, but for her, she was growing up right before my eyes in fast motion. And from that moment in ICU, it was a very scary place because we were surrounded by people dying and you could see it all. You're in the middle of bedlam. I have a huge respect for what our hospital system has gone through from sitting internally during the COVID space, and have written copious thank you notes to the people that have assisted us right the way through this journey to let them know that I know, it was hard. We followed their rules. We did what they said we could and couldn't do, but at times it was heartbreaking to not be where you wanted to be. But we knew that Amy was the person being protected, as in she could have caught anything from a stray parent coming in to visit their child. So there was a lot of protection there.
Once Amy was in ICU, she deteriorated very quickly.
She was only on the high flow for another 24 hours before she then went to as what they call a CPAP machine. And then we just got her stabilised on that and in a comfortable room. And you thought, okay, I still had not gone down this is the end passage, neither had Amy. We had actually started having extensive conversations with her, more asking me questions. And as you can tell by this podcast, I have a lot of words. So she knew that about me and she wanted to get me talking because she was quite breathless on her oxygenation. And all of a sudden she started asking me questions about who her dad and I were before she was born. Were there any family secrets she should know about? She was trying to get a handle on who we were as people. And I went, why on earth would you be asking me these questions? And then she started asking me questions about something that she had actually seen in a dream. And I didn't understand at first. She said, Mum, I know what hallucinations are because I see Woody Woodpecker all the time. But this is not, this is not the hallucination. This is a spiritual thing that I'm seeing, but I don't understand. Can you help me understand it? And she started explaining what she'd seen. And I just burst into tears straight away because what she was describing was when I had prayer ministry 10 odd years prior to this moment. She was describing everything that I had seen in that prayer ministry that she had never been told about. And I went, at first I didn't understand, and then I went into shock and went, I think this is God trying to tell me that he's here. Because how else would he try and communicate? And by Amy knowing something that she could never have understood or known and be repeating it back to me in such detail was just a beautiful touch of heaven for me in relation to we have a God that loves us and he wants to communicate to us in times of trial. And we understood it in that moment because we didn't know where Amy's story was going to go to next. We understood it in that moment that Amy was desperate to find a repurpose. If she wasn't going to be able to dance again, then what was her purpose on earth? And so we discussed, well, if you can see into the spiritual world like this, maybe there's something for you to do relating to that in the future. And so that's where we'd left it that day. And I was really happy with that. It was like, okay, things aren't desperate. They're just hard. And God's here.
Yeah. Raewyn, tell me about those next few hours, because you say that, Amy grew up on the day that she went into hospital that first time. And in her last few hours, she became a child again. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so in that, what I just explained to you, I was nearly talking to a 40, 50-year-old woman. The wisdom and the questions were just so deep. And I just went, wow, I think I've watched you in the last 7 months grow up to be not just an adult, but a wise woman who has handled this situation exceptionally well and led me, your mother, on this journey. And then I'd gone home very happy that night that things were in order. And then at midnight, I got a call from the doctor saying, this is not an end of life call yet, but we need you back in here now. And what he was trying to tell me that he couldn't on the phone was, get your ass in here. We're about to ventilate your daughter and you're going to want us to talk to her. They needed her to fight because they knew something I didn't, and that is if you have had a bone marrow transplant and you're starting to lose your lungs, you will lose both, and there's no answer to that. There is nothing medically you can do. So they fight really hard to try not to ventilate bone marrow transplant patients. I did not know that in that moment. I just knew I had to walk forward I'd only just been home from the hospital for 3 hours. When I got the call, I was exhausted. I was asleep. My 17-year-old son on his L's answered the phone and passed the phone to me from the doctor. And when my husband and I just burst into tears and said, we don't know how to even drive back to the hospital in this moment, my L-plating son said, I will drive you. I call that his hero moment. It was, oh my goodness, everyone is stepping up right now as a family to help each other. And of course, my husband and my son, drove me, dropped me off to the security guard, walked into the ghost-like hospital, didn't know what I was walking into, but saw my daughter for the first time in fear. In 7 months, this was the first time I saw fear in her eyes, which meant I then became very afraid. And the doctors were not going there yet. They were just saying she's in the fight of her life. She needs her mum. She needs her soldier to stand beside her and prop her up and support her, do whatever she asks, while they did everything medically they could to try and stop her from ventilation. She had, what I watched was the day before the 40-year-old woman. Now I had a 2-year-old in front of me because she resorted to patting my face, hanging on to me, where this independent woman the day before was giving me the bird, as a goodbye and being playful, asking questions about, her dad and I. And now all of a sudden she was not even able to toilet herself. So she'd gone back to, I was watching somebody be cared for like a baby, and she was acting like a 2-year-old with the need of what she needed from me as a mother. So I then had to adapt really quickly and just become the mother of a 2-year-old. And all she wanted to do was hang on to me, and she wanted me to sing. I am not a singer and I don't remember words very well. So I said, can I hum? And so I started humming, and she kept telling me, pushing going, move on, next song, until I got to Jesus Loves Me. And I just kept humming that. And she tapped my hand as if, keep going. That's all I want you to do. So I hummed Jesus Loves Me is what I used to hum to her when she was 2. Which is why I call it my 2-year-old moment. I did that then for the next 6 hours while she fought. And the way they explained it to me was, she's climbing Mount Everest right now, Mum. If all she needs you to do is hum a tune that keeps her climbing, then keep humming. And which is what I did. When she fell unconscious, every now and again, they'd put me over in the corner and I'd have a little weep and realise just how serious this had now got. It was a very much this is a key moment in potentially losing her now. This is the only moment that death had even entered my mind. And then I had my God moment where I heard an audible voice say, let her go now. And I just sobbed and I went, I don't want to believe that that's God, and I don't want to believe what he's just told me to do. And I went back and continued humming Jesus Loves Me, and half an hour later the doctors came in and said, it's time to ventilate. You've got the next 10 minutes to say your goodbyes. We don't know if she will wake up from this, but this is our Hail Mary. And all of a sudden I had 10 minutes to comprehend the fact that my daughter could be dying, and these were the last words we get to say to each other. And her dad is at home in bed. Her sister's in New York not knowing what's going on. So we were given permission to make quick phone calls, and she got to say, I love you in a breathless way, and heard I love you back from her brother, her sister, her dad. And then as they proceeded to ventilate, they were trying to shove me out of the room going, you can't be here for this, Mum, it's quite invasive. And I was able to say to her, and I believe this is a God moment because I don't think I would have ever had the words. I got to say to her, Amy, I am the last person you're going to see before you close your eyes, and I will be the first person here when you wake up. But if it's not me, it will be Jesus, and that's a win-win. And she just shut her eyes, and I walked out of the room. When I came back in that room half an hour later, they let me see her, and she was angelic. When you journey through emotion of watching your daughter fight for 6 hours for her life, and then you get to see her resting in peace but still alive, the ventilation was not a Hail Mary to me. It was, she's at peace. And I had to try and then explain that to our family as to what she had journeyed through and the fight she had fought. And we didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow, but right now she's at peace.
Amy was ventilated to give her lungs a rest and her body a chance to gain enough strength to continue fighting. She was only supposed to be ventilated for 2 or 3 days, but she ended up being on the ventilator for 10.
So they had said, we're going to knock you out for a couple of days, give your lungs a rest, and then we'll wake you up. And so they even taught her before they ventilated her how to wake up. When you wake up, you're going to feel like you've got a tube down your throat. And so when I say wake up, they actually paralyse the whole body, and they put you into a coma. So you're not able to talk, you're not able to, it's like being out on a general anaesthetic. You're under and you're laying there completely, none of you moves, and the doctors just do what they need to do to keep you alive in that state. So hence why she looked so peaceful. I prepped myself the next day to come in. So she was ventilated for 10 days. We thought we were having our Hail Mary miracle within the 2 to 3 days when they tried to wake her up. But unfortunately, we were then told that her lungs had failed to a point that they didn't think they could come back from, but they were going to let her go a number of more days to see what happened. And we could see the screen. We knew the numbers were going down, but they were preparing us. And I think that's when we started. My husband was now allowed in because she was entered into palliative care. And we were told that we probably had the next 3 or 4 days with her to say our goodbyes. And they were hoping that we could fly our daughter from New York to Australia and get her in to say a goodbye. But unfortunately, the country was in still full lockdown, and she wasn't given permission to do that unless she wanted to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks. And I did not want my 28-year-old daughter in a hotel on her own, being shuttled from a hotel to a hospital to say goodbye to her sister, and then shuttled back to a hotel and stay there for the next 2 weeks on her own, grieving. Where she was able to actually turn up through FaceTime or WhatsApp or Messenger every day for Amy and talk to her through a screen. So we have beautiful shots of all 3 of my children and myself surrounding in a hospital where, one comatose, my son singing country and western songs to annoy his 2 sisters, and my daughter in a screen, and me present all dressed up, and because you had to wear face masks and, all your PE gear to protect her from us coming in. Again, there was a peace, even though we knew now that this was end of life situation. I think we were all in shock, so there was no way we were accepting that this was the end until the doctor actually told us it was the end, because we'd seen so many comebacks already where you just went, oh, well, she could have possibly died from that, but she didn't. And we knew it was going to be a journey bringing her home out of ventilation, because a few people had very kindly given us, the more days you're in ventilated, the harder it is to relearn everything that you've got to do as a human to cope. What started to happen was a beautiful collaboration of our support network, who weren't allowed to come into the hospital but knew we needed this time with our daughter, and that people started to reach out in different ways, and most in disbelief that this was going to be the end of our journey, and Amy's in particular, from earth to heaven. And we started, one of our worship leaders from our church started sending me worship songs, just one a day. And they were the words we needed to hear to prepare ourselves to live in the present. And they were the words that we wanted to play to Amy. So we would start each day with a worship song, and then Amy's dance group sent in all the dance videos that Amy had been in and video messages, so we could play them to her, because the nurses kept saying, we believe she can hear you. Maybe the doctors will tell you she can't, but we believe she can. And so we believed that she could, and so we acted accordingly. We said that we would fight with her until we were told to stop fighting. So we ended up turning one of the songs that she had won Dance Nationals with her dance group to was called Soldier Keep On Marching On.
Soldier, keep on marching on. Head down till the work is done. Waiting on that morning sun. Soldier, keep on marching on.
And in that last 10 days of her ventilation, that became our mantra. And so we would play that every day to her just before we left, and say, soldier, keep on marching on. Keep marching towards wherever you need to march. We don't know what's going on inside your mind, your body, your soul right now, but we will keep marching beside you while you keep marching. So we just kept turning up and living life with her, and we started just sharing memories. And the nurses can't leave the room, so the tissue boxes would keep disappearing each day, and we worked out it wasn't from us, it was from the nurses, because they were just watching a family grieving together. And we wanted to make it the best possible last 10 days, of whatever that looked like. We said goodbye 5 days in a row, not knowing that she would still be with us the next day, until finally the doctors had to make a decision about, her life, and that Courtney was not going to make it or come or get here from the States, and that there was no hope moving forward medically. She was now on the lung transplant list as well as the bone marrow transplant list, and they basically tried to explain to us that those two things together, one operation can't happen without the other. So and that helped us understand that there was no way forward, so there was no decision to be made. It was literally taken out of our hands again by Amy. We had to concur, basically. And on the day that we said our goodbyes, that were our final goodbyes, and they were turning off the ventilator, we were able to play all those worship songs that we'd played for the last 10 days with her and just celebrate her life. Her dad was able to go through copious childhood memories with her and recount all those precious moments that we'd had with her and the privilege that it had to be her parents. And then we were able to play the Soldier Keep On Marching On song as her finale. And we were able to tell her to turn around and march towards Jesus now. That we now had to become the soldiers, and we would march on her behalf on earth until we meet again. And then something stopped me as we were walking out of the room, because you just don't know how to do it. And I said, I think we have to give our dancer a final bow. And my husband and I just bowed at the end of her bed. and literally took on a marching stance through the hospital to the front door and drove home. I don't know to this day how we did that, but for me, I come back to the faith and the strength of God, and in those moments, He turns up for all of us, no matter what we believe.
How do you say goodbye to a 19-year-old girl who was so full of life, full of purpose, full of joy? The only way Raewyn and her family knew how. With a show, of course.
Because of our faith, we chose not to have the coffin there. We wanted to celebrate who she was. So she was cremated, but in the Thanksgiving service, it was difficult because we could only have 130 people, invited only guests to a funeral, because of the COVID restrictions on space at the time. But it was my childhood church that we had it at, because my church that we attended as a family was being renovated because of COVID. And to this day, I'm grateful for that, because it was one of the hardest days of my life, but it took me back to a safe place in my childhood that I could celebrate my daughter. And when I go to church on a Sunday, I don't have to remember that day. And so that was a gift, in a sense, to us. And I think the day became my focus after we lost her. I went into, I'm a very organised person. I went into event mode, and I went into, this has to be the best event I have ever orchestrated in my life in honour of hers. And I gathered together her best friend and my best friends, and we, as the hundreds of flowers started to arrive on our doorstep, and we had competitions of who would get to the door first, just to try and make jokes of how morbid this actually was. I tried to get to know who she was from her best friend and what I didn't know about her. I didn't even know her favourite colour, because the first thing the funeral people do is say, what colour flowers would you like? What sort of flowers would you like? And you go, oh my goodness, I don't know. But her best friend said, Raewyn, she always wore red when she wanted to feel confident when she went for a dance audition. And I went, that's it, red roses, love. And so we pieced together that week all the things that Amy loved, and the main passion of hers was dance. So we turned the whole Thanksgiving service into a Broadway playbill extravaganza, where we weren't disrespectful to people that wanted to grieve in a more traditional way, but we basically made it into a celebration. We had all her dance costumes on stage, and we got beautiful pictures of her in her dance costumes with her dance shoes underneath put up everywhere. A collage was made of all her in her doing her dancing. We got the only time she was able to choreograph and dance at a women's conference at our church. It had been filmed, and we felt like there needed to be a final bow and a final performance of Amy. So we played, and that dance was to Lauren Daigle's song You Say. And it was the perfect words for the celebration that we were going through. My husband, myself, my son and my daughter all gave eulogies that day. I thought I would have to find the strength to do it on behalf of everyone with my experience doing funerals, but everyone of my immediate family came to the party and said, no, we want to say something too. I went, fantastic. So we recorded Courtney in New York. So she just transitioned in, and we were able to invite the lady that had been, the worship lady that had been sending all the songs in for, those 10 days, who, may I say, continued to do it for 50 odd days after her death. And that was the way I got up every morning starting my day. The song she sent on the day that Amy passed into heaven was I Can Only Imagine.
I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun.
And so I actually asked her to come and sing that at Amy's Thanksgiving service because it was like a full stop at the end of a sentence.
However, Amy's story is not yet finished here. Her legacy continues on in the most remarkable and unexpected ways.
The funeral director that day, and she won't mind me saying this because she's a dear friend now, she had done my dad's funeral 2 months earlier. Then she was doing my daughter's funeral with me, and You Say had become her song where she felt close to coping with her own situation at home. And so she said the day of Amy's Thanksgiving, it was in her workplace, and she heard God. And she came and sought me out after the funeral and asked how she could have a personal relationship with him. So that day to me is pivotal in not telling me you were celebrating what has passed, you lived in the present, but look at what's coming in the future. Her life has not finished here. It continues on. I will see her again in eternity, but there are things on earth for Amy's and my story to join together now and for a voice to be heard.
Tell me about that, Raewyn, because, you started this story with yours and Amy's journey being so deeply intertwined, and you are now taking steps to share both yours and her stories. Can you share a little bit about the projects that are coming through the pipeline for you?
Yeah. It's a hard journey to do during grief, but I think from that day forward, the voice was very loud, and it was pivotal in my healing as I asked myself, how do I want to do this grief? I'm into my second year now of grieving, and the first year for me was all about honouring her legacy and giving her a voice and getting through all the firsts. And so people started turning up with roses, and so we now have a beautiful rose garden in our backyard in honour of Amy, and I get to look at these beautiful rose petals, all just scatter throughout the garden, and you just go, there's a little piece of her here because it's in nature. And I watch the ebbs and flows of the roses, and they usually connect with how I'm feeling. And so I hear her voice in that. And then her dance studio was pivotal in her feeling connected in the future. And so we wanted to honour her legacy. And so my husband and I chatted to them and said, could we donate money to and have a scholarship so that more dancers can come who might not be able to afford it? Because I'd started at the school as a poor single mother, and now I was finishing my schooling 23 years later with my youngest son just finishing his HSC on the same year Amy had passed. And this wasn't goodbye for me. This was a beginning of a journey. And it was, how do you celebrate what this school and this dance community have done for you? Because the dance community is connected to the Christian school. And I was able to stand up at their presentation night and talk for 5 minutes about who Amy was, and then gift somebody this legacy of a dance scholarship that we'll give for the next 10 years so that people can keep dancing in her honour. And I just went, I can think of no better way, to have her life still honoured in that dancing community. And now I help mentor those dance teachers, and they see me as their chaplain. So it's a beautiful circle, I think, is what we'd been discussing before. And then that circle, as the grieving has continued, and allowed me to start to see that if I combine my chaplaincy voice and my speaking and writing side hustle together with Amy's story, there is something spectacular to be said in having people hear vulnerability around grief and learning from people that are willing to be vulnerable around that space and share what they've journeyed through. Even though we're all different, there might just be one thing you hear that changes your world, and you now know how to get on with it. I've been writing books for the last 10 years. I believe book 4 that I'm writing now will be the start of that series, and it will start with Amy, and it will start with what we've learned about grief, and it will start with me finding the little bits of joy in each day to keep going forward. And, I'm hoping one day that in trying to build those chapters, a podcast might birth itself out of that as well. So again, just trying to look at the things that come my way and we'll step into them with as much bravery as I can, because they're not comfortable spaces. I might sound confident talking about this today, but I can tell you I've got my confident red undies on to give me the bravery.
I love that. Raewyn, how do you like to best remember Amy?
The easiest and simplistic way is in my heart. So as a Christian, I believe Jesus, simplistically as a child, was told that if I found faith in Christ and asked for forgiveness, Jesus would come live in my heart. And that's where I've kept him all my life. And that keeps me true to my faith. And if I believe in what I believe in, then Amy's in eternity and I will see her again. But I don't want to wait to see her. I want to feel her. And so I actually feel her in my heart. So I wake up every day feeling like she's walking with me.
Thank you to Raewyn Elsegood for bravely sharing her and Amy's story. I can't overstate how deeply moved I was to witness Raewyn share Amy's journey so beautifully. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. Stories are always better when they're shared, and you never know what you can learn from someone else's journey. If you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. For now, I'll leave you with this verse. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying. Neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21, verse 4. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.